Regenerations are such an important part to Doctor Who, and actually such a clever way of keeping the show fresh and also avoiding that awkward moment when an actor is suddenly replaced and you're like, hang on a second, that's not the same person. Now, obviously, this October we were treated to another long-awaited regeneration as we saw Jodie Whittaker stand down as the 13th Doctor. So actually now feels like the perfect time to take a look at every regeneration in Doctor Who and rank them. So are you ready to see a lot of orangey yellow light? Because there's about to be a lot of it. With that in mind, I'm Ellie with Who Culture, here with every regeneration ranked from worst to best. Number 14, the Third Doctor in Planet of the Spiders. Left stranded on Earth due to the actions of his former self, most of the Third Doctor's adventures take place on our home planet alongside UNIT. They also feature a bright yellow car called Bessie and Jon Pertwee doing a lot of karate. Yeah, this was a weird time for the show. Eventually, Pertwee's Doctor does get his TARDIS back, but this proves to be his ultimate undoing. He travels to a planet inhabited by giant spiders and destroys them all using the energy of a special crystal. But unfortunately, he too is caught in the blast, which triggers his regeneration. Unfortunately though, his actual final scene takes place under much less dramatic circumstances. The Doctor manages to pilot the TARDIS back to Earth, collapsing in his lab with Sarah Jane and the Brigadier present. They then receive a visit from the Doctor's former mentor, who sort of looks like Lakitu from Mario Kart. The mentor guides the humans through the process before fading away as Pertwee's face changes into Tom Baker's. It's hardly the most exciting regeneration in history, and the presence of a bloke floating on a cloud only complicates things further. You'd think, considering this was the third time they'd done a regeneration, that the showrunners would have known better by this point. Number 13, the War Doctor in The Day of the Doctor. As portrayed by the late, great John Hurt, the War Doctor is a very confusing addition to the Time Lord's timeline. A version of the Doctor who has been fighting in the Time War, the War Doctor comes into contact with his future selves after attempting to use a super weapon known as the Moment. Now, originally out to destroy both the Time Lords and the Daleks, the War Doctor is convinced by his alternate selves to avoid this loss of life, and they instead freeze Gallifrey in time to save its inhabitants. After this is complete, the old man thanks his younger selves, who are actually older, but you get it, and flies away in his TARDIS. And then he regenerates. But is that because he's old? Does he just get tired and die? Though it obviously symbolises the completion of his struggle, the War Doctor's regeneration still kind of came out of nowhere. And the fact that Christopher Eccleston refused to return for this episode just makes it seem incomplete and kind of ruined the moment. It was a really nice idea, but in the end it was kind of poorly executed. Number 12, the Second Doctor in The War Games. The first actor to play a regenerated version of the Doctor, Patrick Troughton, had a lot on his shoulders when he first appeared in the role. And while he did an excellent job with the character, his regeneration left a lot to be desired. He was basically bullied into the change by the Time Lords, who make their first ever appearance in this episode. The Doctor's race catches up with him and puts him on trial for his space-time meddling. Their verdict? Exile on Earth with a new face. After some frankly hilarious, whether that was intentional or not, back and forth between the two parties, the Time Lords send the Doctor down to Earth in the form of a psychedelic spiral, with our hero crying out while it happens. Now, on paper, this sounds like it could be quite interesting, and to some extent it was. It was a radical departure from the first regeneration, but it was let down by how campy it was. Number 11, the First Doctor in The 10th Planet. Now, William Hartnell is the reason we have regeneration today. His failing health caused huge panic among the writers of Doctor Who until the idea of changing the Doctor's face was suggested, and with that, a TV institution was born. Now, the First Doctor's regeneration is a very simple one. At the end of the 10th Planet, the Time Lord's old body finally catches up with him and he collapses. Remarking that his body has worn out, the Doctor shuts his eyes and transforms into a brilliant flash of white light. It's an incredibly simple regeneration, but what did you expect from their first attempt? Obviously, the show was still working this mechanic out and needed to establish it in this episode, and that's exactly what they did. No bells, no whistles, just simple face change. Now, it might be unremarkable to look at these days, but considering the time it took place and the impact it's had on the show today, this is such an important moment in TV history. Number 10, the Sixth Doctor in Time and the RANI. The much-maligned Colin Baker years of Doctor Who came to an end in 1986 when the BBC relieved the actor of his duties. And as a result of this, the story of Baker's regeneration is as interesting as it is controversial. Instead of making the switch at the end of a serial, as had been the tradition up to that point, the change from the 6th Doctor to the 7th Doctor was done at the beginning of the 1987 story Time and the RANI. Here, the TARDIS is shot down by a villainous Time Lady and crash lands on a planet called Lacertia. Now, the Doctor perishes as a result of that crash, and his face alters under a colourful swirl of energy. Unfortunately, Baker himself had already left the show by this point, so his part was played by Sylvester McCoy in a blonde wig. Now, honestly, you couldn't make this up. It might have been chaos behind the scenes, but the on-screen regeneration was actually quite exciting. The special effects on the TARDIS crash have aged like warm milk, but they must have been thrilling for the audiences at the time. Not a terrible regeneration, but maybe not a great one either. Number 9. The 8th Doctor in The Night of the Doctor. Brought in to replace Sylvester McCoy for the Doctor Who TV movie in 1996, Paul McGann made just one appearance in the role before 2013, and has been credited by some as having killed off the franchise before it was brought back in 2005. This isn't true, of course, but people like having someone to blame. McGann got his chance at redemption in the web-exclusive minisode The Night of the Doctor, which was also part of the show's half-century celebrations. The episode begins with the 8th Doctor trying to save a pilot from crashing, only to die in the crash himself. He is momentarily revived by the Sisterhood of Khan, who make a plea to him. They beg him to drink their elixir, which will allow him to choose characteristics for his next form. They ask him to become a warrior in order to stop the Time War and bring peace to the universe, and 8 begrudgingly accepts. Now, it's not big or flashy, but the 8th Doctor's regeneration is one of the more unique ones in the series, and it also gave McGann another shot at the character as he deserved. Number 8. The 12th Doctor in Twice Upon a Time. Peter Capaldi is one of the finest actors to ever play the Doctor. From Skins to The Thick of It to Paddington and even to Torchwood, Capaldi has excelled in every role he's ever had, and gave a spirited performance as the 12th Doctor, even when the show's popularity took a downward turn. Much like he carried the acclaimed episode Heaven Sent, Capaldi carries the 12th Doctor's regeneration single-handedly. After helping his first incarnation come to terms with his impending death, 12 decides that he too is ready to depart. After a beautifully recited soliloquy advising his next form, the Scottish Doctor regenerates in a blast of light. And that regeneration speech is certainly one to remember. Number 7. The 4th Doctor in Logopolis. Tom Baker helmed Doctor Who for 7 seasons, way more than anyone else, and left behind an untouchable legacy on British TV. Now, his final appearance as the Doctor came in the 1981 serial Logopolis. After teaming up with the Master to prevent the unravelling of the universe, the Doctor is betrayed by his nemesis. Shock horror! And ends up falling from a huge telescope to the ground below. He's surrounded by his companions as the Watcher, a ghostly white figure who looks a bit like a toilet paper mummy, fuses with the fallen adventurer to begin his next metamorphosis. The actual regeneration process isn't super impressive. Baker basically turns white for a second and then Peter Davison appears gurning in his place. But it's what happens before this that's important. While awaiting his fate, the Doctor receives visions of all his past companions. Though not as good as future callbacks, this moment is still very sweet and proves just how momentous it was to lose Tom Baker as the Doctor. Number 6. The 13th Doctor in The Power of the Doctor. Now, I don't know why anyone wouldn't have seen it yet, but just in case you haven't seen The Power of the Doctor yet, this entry is obviously going to contain major spoilers, so be warned. The shocking conclusion to The Power of the Doctor has reignited an interest in Doctor Who that the show hasn't seen in years. After being mortally wounded by the Master, Jodie Whittaker's version of the character says her goodbyes to Yaz before flying the TARDIS one last time. Arriving on a cliff's edge, Whittaker takes one last look at the sun before saying, "Tag, you're it," and then regenerates into David Tennant. What? This reveal is almost the entire reason for this regeneration being as high as it is. Although we are yet to see what happens with Tennant's second go-around, this regeneration represents hope for a series that many have considered on the ropes for quite some time. Having said that, I can also appreciate and understand that there are some people who feel that David Tennant's introduction here did take away from the significance of Jodie Whittaker's departure and also overshadowed the introduction of Ncuti Gatwa as the next incarnation of the Doctor. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions, and we will be kind to everyone despite their opinions maybe differing from ours. Okay, let's move on. Number 5. The 7th Doctor in Doctor Who the Movie. The 1996 Doctor Who TV movie is extremely divisive. On one hand, it was praised for being more grown up with a more mature tone and a greater emphasis on violence. On the other hand, the plot was heavily criticised and some fans claimed the whole thing felt very un-Who-like. Regardless of your thoughts on the project, you can't deny that Sylvester McCoy's regeneration into Paul McGann was pretty cool. After being shot by a street gang, told you it was darker, the Doctor dies on the operating table of a San Francisco hospital. He then undergoes his most gruesome regeneration yet, his face contorting and twisting as it changes. The entire sequence is intercut with a morgue security guard watching the 1931 movie Frankenstein, and the parallels between the famous monster and our hero are clear and are presented very nicely in this sequence. The movie might have bombed, but at least they tried something new with this scene. Number 4. The 11th Doctor in The Time of the Doctor. As the youngest person to take on the role of the Doctor, it was rather ironic that Matt Smith's 11th Doctor died of old age. After centuries of battle on the planet Trenzalore, the valiant defender finally wears out and dies, but not before Clara Oswald persuades the Time Lords to grant him a new regeneration cycle. This gets around the problem of the Doctor having used up his 12 regenerations prior to this point. After returning to his younger self for a brief goodbye with Clara, the Doctor then sees visions of a young Amelia Pond, the first face this face saw. An adult Amy then appears to guide him to his rest before he quickly sneezes into Peter Capaldi. The emotional farewell with Amy followed by the breakneck change to a new face is a really satisfying contrast and is the most original New Who regeneration so far. Number 3. The 9th Doctor in The Parting of the Ways. 9 years after the TV movie, Doctor Who burst back onto TV screens with a new series from writer Russell T Davies. Leading the charge as the 9th iteration of Gallifrey's favourite son was Christopher Eccleston, who expertly straddled the line between a dark version of the character and the cheeky chappy fans knew and loved. Eccleston stuck around for just one series of the show, but he made sure to go out in spectacular fashion. He saved Rose Tyler from the power of the time vortex, absorbing the energy that powers the TARDIS at the cost of his own life. After a heartfelt speech to Rose, capped with a typically brazen last line, the 9th Doctor erupts into a burst of yellow-orange energy, and the tough northern exterior of Eccleston makes way for the smooth Scottish good looks of David Tennant. The convention of the Doctor emitting light from their face and hands while regenerating has appeared in every single regeneration since then. This moment helped establish a new convention for the show, which, combined with the emotional farewell that preceded it, is why it is so high up on this list. Number 2. The 5th Doctor in The Caves of Androzani. The final story of Peter Davison's 5th Doctor takes him and his companion Peri to the ANDROZANI system of planets. ANDROZANI is famous for containing spectrox, a mineral with life-extending qualities when diluted. Unfortunately, the Doctor manages to step in some raw spectrox, which is lethal. The Doctor succumbs to the illness and enters a hallucinogenic state. The screen then fills with a bizarre pinkish-purplish pattern as the voices of the Doctor's friends and foes merge together. The screen then snaps back to normal and Davison is gone. It's a fantastically melodramatic regeneration that perfectly simulates the poison running through the Doctor's body. It's still one of the most interesting regenerations to watch all these years later. Number 1. The 10th Doctor in The End of Time. Dying as the result of radiation poisoning after rescuing Wilfred Mott, the 10th Doctor embarks on one last tour of the universe to say goodbye to those he loves. Captain Jack, Martha, Donna and even Rose all get their final moments with the Doctor before he enters the TARDIS one last time. Slowly pacing around his trusty ship, the Doctor's face runs the full gamut of emotions from fear to anger, regret to sadness. As he realises his time has come, he stares almost directly down the camera, in the eyes of everyone watching and says, "I don't want to go." Tennant's Doctor then explodes in a burst of light, destroying his version of the TARDIS in the process, which is a little bit overdramatic if I must say. It's heartbreaking, plain and simple. And there wasn't a dry eye across the country when he said goodbye, and if you didn't cry, well, you're lying, you did. Without Tennant, Doctor Who would not be the show it is today. It's only appropriate then that he got the grandest send-off in the history of the programme. And as we all know, he's not finished yet. And that concludes our ranking. Now, obviously, your ranking might be different, so let us know your thoughts in the comments below, but remember to be kind and respectful of other people's opinions if they differ to yours. Also, remember to hit that like and subscribe button and tap that notification bell so you never miss a Who Culture video again. And while you're at it, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and also Instagram as well, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.